When someone doesn't value you anymore, the first step isn't about pointing fingers or trying to fix the other person. It begins with something far more powerful, you. It starts with a quiet pause, a deep breath, and the courage to face yourself honestly. See, it's easy to get lost in the question of why they changed, why they stopped appreciating you, why they no longer see your worth. But the truth is, before you can find peace, you have to turn the mirror inward. You have to ask yourself, have I allowed behaviors that disrespected me? Have I stayed silent when I should have spoken up? Have I been trying too hard to prove my worth to someone who refuses to see it? These questions aren't meant to make you feel guilty. They're meant to wake you up. Because awareness is the first step to freedom. It's about reclaiming your power piece by piece. Sometimes being undervalued doesn't start with someone else. It starts with the moments we choose to overlook the signs, the times we accept less than we deserve because we're afraid to lose what little we have left. Maybe you've been too accommodating, saying yes when your heart screamed no. Maybe you've tolerated inconsistency because you feared being alone. And little by little, without realizing it, you've taught them exactly how to treat you. The truth is, people learn from what you allow. Every time you stay quiet when you should have spoken up, you reinforce the message that your boundaries can be crossed. Every time you overextend yourself just to earn their approval, you silently teach them that your needs come second. It's not that they don't see your worth, it's that you've stopped showing it, and that's where it has to change. Self-reflection is not about blame, it's about clarity. It's standing in front of your own truth and saying, I see where I gave too much, I see where I settled, but I'm not gonna live that way anymore. Because when you recognize the role you've played, you take your power back. You stop waiting for others to give you the respect you deserve, and you start giving it to yourself first. Think of this as your emotional reset, not to restart the relationship, but to restart yourself, your standards, your energy, your boundaries. Ask yourself, am I giving from love or from fear? Am I trying to keep the peace, or am I keeping myself small to avoid conflict? Because there's a difference between kindness and self-betrayal. One builds connection, the other builds resentment. This process isn't comfortable, it never is, but discomfort is a sign of growth. It's the part of you that's been quiet for too long, finally asking to be heard. And when you listen, truly listen, you'll begin to see the patterns that have kept you stuck. Maybe this isn't the first time you felt undervalued. Maybe it's a reflection of something deeper, a pattern that started long before this person ever entered your life. Maybe you learned somewhere along the way that love must be earned, that you must give more, sacrifice more, prove more, just to be enough. But let me tell you something, your worth doesn't increase by how much you give, or how long you stay, or how much pain you can endure. Your worth was never up for negotiation. It's been there all along, unshaken, unbroken, waiting for you to remember it. So right now, take a moment and breathe. Let go of the need to be understood, to be chosen, to be validated by someone who can't see your light. Because the truth is, their inability to value you says nothing about your value. It only reveals their own blindness. When someone can't see your worth, that's not a reflection of you. It's a limitation of them. This is where your healing begins, not when they apologize, not when they change, not when they realize what they lost, but when you decide you're done chasing what doesn't value you. When you decide to choose yourself instead. That decision is power. That moment is freedom. From this point forward, everything changes. Because when you start valuing yourself, the world around you begins to shift. The relationships that rely on imbalance will start to crumble, and the ones that truly honor you will stand strong. And yes, that process can be lonely at first. You may have to let go of people you thought would stay forever. But remember, peace is never found in the presence of those who undervalue you. It's found in the absence of what drains your soul. You are not here to beg for love, to convince anyone of your worth, or to prove yourself to those who refuse to see you. You are here to embody your value so fully that others have no choice but to feel it. To walk in your truth so confidently that losing you becomes their lesson, not your pain. So as you take this first step, understand this. Reflection is not weakness, it's strength. It's not about fixing what's broken between you and them. It's about fixing what's been neglected within yourself. Because the moment you reclaim your power, you stop being a victim of someone's indifference, and you become the author of your own worth. And that right there is where the transformation truly begins. The moment you recognize that someone no longer values you, your instinct may be to question what you did wrong. You might replay every conversation, every gesture, searching for the moment where things shifted. But the truth is, value isn't lost in a single moment. It fades slowly, like light at the end of the day, until one day you realize you're standing in the dark, still waiting for them to see you. And that realization hurts. It's the kind of pain that settles deep, not because you miss them, but because you miss the version of yourself you were when you felt seen. But here's the truth. Most people never tell you. When someone stops valuing you, it's not the end of your worth. It's the beginning of your awakening. It's the universe pulling you away from the illusion that love means proving yourself and guiding you toward the truth that love begins within you. This is not punishment, it's redirection. And if you can hold on long enough to see that, you'll understand that being undervalued was never the problem. Staying where you're unseen was. This is the stage where you must learn one of the hardest lessons. You cannot convince someone to see your worth. No matter how much you give, no matter how much you explain, no matter how patient you are, people can only meet you at the level of their own awareness. If they are blind to their own value, how can they truly recognize yours? If they are lost within themselves, how can they see the depth of you? You have to stop trying to prove that you deserve better. Because the moment you begin explaining your worth, you've already started negotiating it. And your worth is not up for discussion. It's not something that needs justification. It's something that needs embodiment. It needs to be lived, not spoken. So instead of asking, why don't they value me? Start asking, why am I allowing myself to stay where I'm not valued? That single shift in perspective is where your power returns. It moves the focus from them, their actions, their indifference, their lack, and places it back on you, where it belongs. Because the real question isn't about their perception, it's about your participation. What part of you believes that being half seen is better than walking away entirely? What story are you still telling yourself about love, loyalty, and worth that keeps you waiting for someone to choose you? It's time to rewrite that story, to understand that love built on the need to be seen will always crumble under the weight of dependency. But love that grows from self-respect, from knowing who you are and what you deserve, that kind of love is unshakable. It's not loud, it doesn't beg, it simply is. The next step then is detachment. Not from the person, but from the expectation. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you stop clinging. It means you stop defining your peace by how someone else behaves. Because the moment your happiness depends on another person's validation, you've handed over the keys to your freedom. Think of detachment like standing in the rain without running for cover. You let the feelings fall, disappointment, confusion, anger, but you don't drown in them. You stand still, breathe, and let the storm pass, and it will pass. Every emotion, no matter how heavy, eventually softens when you stop feeding it with thoughts of what if and why me. You begin to see things as they are, not as you wish they were, and that clarity is where healing begins. Because healing isn't about forgetting or pretending you're unaffected. It's about understanding that what you lost wasn't your value, but your illusion of control. You can't make people treat you right. You can't force them to recognize your worth, but you can choose not to participate in your own diminishment. It takes courage to walk away from a place where your heart still wants to stay. It takes strength to admit that love without respect isn't love at all. But that courage, that strength, is what transforms you. It's what builds the quiet confidence that says, I deserve more, even if it means standing alone for a while. And here's what happens when you make that choice. Your energy begins to shift. You start to reclaim the parts of yourself you gave away. You laugh again, not because they returned, but because you did. You stop explaining yourself, stop chasing closure, stop waiting for apologies that may never come. Instead, you start building something that was missing all along, a relationship with yourself that feels safe, steady, and real. You begin to understand that your value isn't in being chosen, it's in being authentic. And when you live from that truth, you become untouchable. Because people who know their worth don't beg to be valued. They walk where they are celebrated, not tolerated. They understand that being alone in peace is far better than being surrounded by those who can't see their light. This is where the story turns. From pain to power, from loss to liberation. You begin to see that the ending of what was is not the loss of you. It's the rediscovery of you. Because every time someone fails to value you, the universe whispers the same message. It's time to choose yourself again. And the moment you finally do, you realize that's what love was meant to feel like all along. There comes a moment somewhere after the tears and the silence when you finally stop asking why. You stop trying to make sense of their absence. Stop searching for hidden meanings in the things they said. Stop convincing yourself that if you were just a little more patient, a little more loving, maybe they would have stayed. It's a strange kind of peace, not the loud, triumphant kind, but the quiet surrender that comes from understanding that some things are simply not meant to be fixed. not because you weren't enough, but because you've outgrown the version of yourself that tolerated so little. This is where healing truly begins, not in getting answers from them, but in giving closure to yourself. Because closure isn't something someone hands you, it's something you create, one decision at a time. It's the choice to stop reopening wounds that are trying to heal. It's the realization that no explanation will make their choices make sense, because their choices were never yours to control. You start to see things with clearer eyes. You see that love, when it's real, doesn't require you to shrink to fit someone else's comfort. It doesn't demand that you sacrifice your peace to earn affection. Love is meant to expand you, not exhaust you. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and even for them, is to walk away when staying means betraying your soul. The truth is, not everyone who comes into your life is meant to stay forever. Some are lessons disguised as love, mirrors that reflect the parts of yourself you've neglected. They teach you where you still abandon yourself, where you still accept crumbs when you deserve a feast. It's not cruelty, it's clarity. And clarity, though painful, is the most honest kind of gift life can offer. Detachment, then, is not coldness, it's compassion. It's looking at someone who once held your heart and saying, "I love you, but I love me more." It's realizing that you can wish them well without wishing them back. You can forgive them without inviting them in. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It means freeing yourself from the weight of resentment that keeps you tied to the past. It's choosing to let peace matter more than pride. And slowly, something begins to shift. You notice you're thinking about them less. The silence that once felt unbearable starts to feel like space. Room to breathe, room to rebuild, room to rediscover the parts of yourself that were lost in the noise of trying to be enough. You wake up one day and realize that you no longer crave their validation. You no longer replay old conversations in your head. You've stopped checking whether they noticed your absence because you finally noticed your own presence. You begin to fill your life with things that make you feel alive again. Not out of revenge or to prove a point, but because you deserve joy that doesn't depend on anyone else's attention. You start to laugh again, to move again, to live again. And that's when you understand that healing isn't loud or dramatic, it's subtle. It's the way your shoulders relax when you no longer carry the weight of someone else's approval. It's the way your heart beats steady when you're no longer waiting for a message that may never come. There's a beautiful irony in all this. The moment you stop chasing the person who couldn't see your value, the world starts reflecting that value back to you. Opportunities appear, connections deepen. You meet people who speak to you in ways that remind you what it means to be understood. And you realize that losing someone who didn't value you wasn't the end of love. It was the beginning of self-respect. But self-respect isn't just a feeling, it's a discipline. It's the small choices you make every day to honor yourself. It's saying no when your peace is at stake. It's walking away from conversations that cost your dignity. It's refusing to fight for a place in someone's life who doesn't fight for a place in yours. This isn't bitterness, it's balance. It's learning that love without reciprocity is just self-sacrifice in disguise. And in that balance, something extraordinary happens. You stop fearing solitude because you realize that being alone isn't the same as being lonely. Loneliness is the absence of connection, but solitude is the presence of yourself. It's sitting in silence and realizing that you enjoy your own company. It's feeling whole, not because someone else completes you, but because you finally complete yourself. That's the kind of peace no one can give you and no one can take away. It's the peace that comes when you stop trying to rewrite other people's stories and start writing your own. You stop seeing yourself as a supporting character in someone else's narrative and become the author of your own transformation. So if you find yourself standing in that moment, somewhere between heartbreak and healing, remember this. What you lost was not love. What you lost was the version of yourself that believed you needed to be chosen to be worthy. And what you're gaining is far greater. You're gaining a life built on authenticity, strength, and self-respect. You're gaining yourself. And once you've found that, once you've truly remembered who you are, you'll never let anyone make you forget it again. There's a certain kind of silence that arrives after you've made peace with letting go. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of clarity. It's the quiet that settles in once the chaos stops. When you finally stop trying to convince someone to see your worth and start seeing it yourself. It's calm, but not empty. It's still, but alive. And in that stillness, something begins to rebuild within you, something steady, something unshakable. This is the part no one talks about enough, the rebuilding of the self. Because after being undervalued, after pouring your energy into proving your worth, you forget what it means to pour into yourself. You've been so busy trying to earn love that you've forgotten what it feels like to simply exist in it, not someone else's, but your own. And so the journey forward becomes about learning how to return home to yourself. You start small, not with grand gestures, but with quiet choices. You wake up and ask yourself, what do I need today? Not what do they need, not what will make them happy, but what brings me peace right now. You begin to honor that voice, the one that used to whisper and now speaks louder each day. It tells you when to rest, when to walk away, when to say no. And for the first time in a long time, you start listening. The rebuilding stage isn't about revenge or becoming stronger to prove something. It's not about becoming colder or distant. It's about becoming grounded, because strength isn't hardness, it's stability. It's the ability to stand firm in who you are, even when the world tries to shake you. It's knowing your worth so deeply that someone's inability to see it no longer threatens your peace. You learn that peace is not passive. Peace is active. It's a decision, a boundary, a practice. Peace is saying no without guilt. It's walking away from arguments that go nowhere. It's refusing to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. And as you practice peace, you realize how much noise you used to tolerate, how much of your mental space was occupied by trying to manage someone else's emotions while ignoring your own. This stage also brings something beautiful, rediscovery. You begin to reconnect with the things that make you feel alive. Maybe it's music, maybe it's writing, maybe it's the simple act of walking alone without your phone, without distraction. You start to notice the small joys you used to overlook, the sound of rain, the comfort of solitude, the quiet satisfaction of keeping promises to yourself. This is healing. Not the kind you post about, but the kind you feel deep in your bones. And while you're rebuilding, life has a way of testing your growth. Someone might reappear, maybe the person who once undervalued you, maybe someone new who mirrors old patterns. And in that moment, you'll be tempted to slip back into old habits, to prove again, to explain again, to shrink again. But something inside you pauses this time. It remembers the exhaustion of trying to be enough for someone who doesn't even know what enough looks like. And in that pause, you choose differently. You choose yourself. This choice doesn't come from pride. It comes from peace. It's the calm certainty that says, I don't need to convince anyone of my value anymore. It's not arrogance. It's alignment. It's the realization that you no longer need to chase what you can naturally attract when you live authentically. Because when you respect yourself, you create a standard, a quiet energy that communicates without words. The right people will feel it. The wrong ones will fall away. And that's the beauty of this chapter. Now, it's not about others at all. It's about you learning to exist outside the lens of someone else's perception. For so long, your worth has been reactive, based on how others treated you, how much they gave, how much they withheld. Now it becomes proactive, defined by how you treat yourself. You start to see that self-respect is not built in declarations, but in daily actions. It's choosing honesty over approval. It's keeping promises to yourself even when no one's watching. It's showing up fully for your own life without needing an audience. And the more you live this way, the more whole you become. Wholeness changes everything. It changes the kind of people you attract, the conversations you have, the things you tolerate. When you operate from wholeness, you stop negotiating with anyone who demands that you break yourself into pieces just to fit into their world, because you've spent too long rebuilding those pieces to ever give them away again. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll look back and see that the version of you who once begged for attention, for clarity, for love, that version no longer exists. She learned, she evolved. She grew roots in her solitude and wings in her peace. She became someone who doesn't chase anymore because she understands that what's meant for her doesn't require convincing. That's what it means to heal. Not to return to who you were before the pain, but to become someone wiser because of it. Someone who understands that love is never about losing yourself. Someone who knows that the only validation worth having is the one that comes from within. So if you're rebuilding right now, take your time. This isn't a race, it's a resurrection. The person you're becoming deserves patience. Every boundary, every no, every act of self-care is a brick in the foundation of your new life. And when you finally stand on that foundation, steady, whole, unshaken. You'll understand that losing someone who didn't value you was never the tragedy. It was the beginning of your becoming. There comes a moment in your healing when the focus quietly shifts. It's no longer about the person who couldn't see your worth, or the pain they caused, or the questions that kept you awake at night. It becomes about you, about how you rebuild, how you rise, how you choose to live from this point forward. This is the stage where your energy begins to turn inward, not out of isolation, but out of intention. Because when you stop pouring into people who don't value you, you finally have something left to pour into yourself. And that's where the real transformation begins. You start to understand that healing isn't just about moving on. It's about moving inward. It's about rediscovering who you are without the noise of trying to please, fix, or impress anyone. You realize that your value was never supposed to depend on someone else's recognition. It was meant to be cultivated from within, like a light that doesn't flicker just because someone else turns away. So you begin to build new habits, small but sacred ones. You wake up earlier, not because you have to, but because you want to meet the world on your own terms. You take care of your body, not as punishment, but as gratitude. You speak to yourself with kindness because you've learned that the way you talk to yourself becomes the tone of your entire life. You start treating your own presence as something valuable. Instead of chasing after people, you attract experiences. Instead of waiting for someone to validate your worth, you validate yourself through action, through doing the things that bring you peace and purpose. It's subtle at first, this shift, but it's powerful. Because when you start living like you are enough, the world begins to reflect that truth back to you. You begin to invest in yourself the same way you once invested in others. The time you used to spend waiting for someone's attention becomes time spent learning, creating, exploring. You take that energy, the one that used to be desperation, and turn it into direction. And in doing so, you realize that self-investment isn't selfish. It's sacred. It's the foundation for everything good that follows. Because here's the truth. No relationship, no love, no opportunity can make up for the lack of a relationship with yourself. You can't expect others to see what you refuse to honor. And once you understand that, you stop waiting for someone to complete you, because you were never incomplete to begin with. This stage of your journey is about reclaiming your independence, not just emotionally, but spiritually. It's about rediscovering what excites you, what challenges you, what makes you feel alive. Maybe it's picking up a dream you once set aside, or learning something new that reignites your curiosity. Maybe it's traveling, creating, writing, or simply finding joy in moments of solitude. Whatever it is, it's yours. Not borrowed from someone else's presence or approval, but born entirely from within. And the beautiful irony is that once you stop searching for validation, you start attracting the right kind of energy. People who respect themselves recognize that same energy in others. They sense your peace, your confidence, your calm. They don't come to take from you, they come to share. Because when you live in alignment with your worth, you naturally draw in those who vibrate on that same level. This doesn't mean you'll never be tested again. Life will always test your growth. There will still be moments when you're tempted to go back, to prove your value, to reopen doors that are better left closed. But each time, it will hurt less. Each time, your peace will speak louder than your pain. And one day, you'll find yourself smiling at the memory of the person you once were, the one who begged for love, and you'll feel nothing but gratitude. Because that version of you had to break so that this version of you could be born. You start to see love differently too. You stop craving intensity and start craving consistency. You stop chasing butterflies and start valuing peace, because you've learned that love that costs your sanity isn't love. It's chaos disguised as passion. Real love, the kind that nourishes rather than drains, begins with the love you give yourself. And when you truly embody that, you'll never settle for less again. This phase of your journey is also about redefining success. Before, success might have meant being chosen, being seen, being loved back. Now it means waking up in peace. It means setting goals that are yours, not built around proving anything to anyone. It means building a life that feels good on the inside, not just one that looks good from the outside. Because when you align your life with your inner peace, you no longer chase, you attract. This shift is powerful because it changes everything in the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you show up in the world. You begin to move with quiet confidence, not arrogance, but assurance. Your presence says, I know my worth, and I don't need to convince anyone of it. And that energy, that calm certainty is magnetic. And that's when something unexpected happens. The person who once undervalued you might notice. They might see the light they dimmed now shining brighter than ever. They might reach out, say they've changed, say they finally understand. But by then, you've grown so much that their recognition no longer feels like validation. It feels like confirmation. Confirmation that walking away was the best decision you ever made. Because by now, you've learned the most important lesson of all. Love doesn't heal you. Self-respect does. And when you learn to love yourself from that place of self-respect, you no longer chase love. You create it, you live it, you become it. So if you're in that stage of rediscovering yourself, keep going, keep investing, keep building, keep choosing yourself again and again. Because this is where everything begins to change. This is where you stop surviving and start living. This is where you stop waiting for someone else to see your worth and start becoming the proof of it. There's a moment often quiet and unnoticed when you realize that the heaviness you've been carrying is finally starting to lift. It doesn't happen all at once. Healing rarely does. But there's a shift. The ache that once sat at the center of your chest begins to fade. The thoughts that once consumed you lose their edge. And for the first time in a long time, you catch yourself smiling without forcing it. That's when you know you're not the same person anymore. You've crossed an invisible threshold from pain to peace, from needing to be understood to understanding yourself. This stage of your journey isn't about recovery. It's about rebirth. It's the quiet reconstruction of your spirit, the rebuilding of your confidence, the rediscovery of your joy. It's not about proving anything, not to them, not to the world, and not even to yourself. It's about living differently, intentionally, with a kind of strength that doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. You start to notice that you no longer crave chaos. Once, you might have mistaken intensity for connection, the constant push and pull, the uncertainty, the waiting for someone's attention to feel alive. But now, peace feels better. Stability feels sacred. Silence no longer feels like loneliness. It feels like freedom. And that change in taste is what marks true growth. Because when peace becomes your preference, your entire life begins to shift. You become more selective with your energy. You start to guard your time, not out of fear, but out of respect. You realize how valuable your attention is, how precious your calm has become, and you no longer hand it out carelessly. You stop explaining your worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop apologizing for having boundaries, and you begin to see that protecting your peace is not selfish. It's necessary. You learn to live without the constant need for validation. There was a time when you needed someone to notice your effort, to acknowledge your value, to say you're enough, but now you know better. Now you understand that validation that comes from others is temporary. It fades, it fluctuates, it depends on their mood or their perspective. But validation that comes from within, that's eternal. It's the kind that grounds you when the world is uncertain, the kind that keeps you steady when people disappoint you. This doesn't mean you've become closed off or unfeeling. It means you've learned discernment. You can still love deeply, but not blindly. You can still care, but not at the cost of yourself. You've realized that love without boundaries isn't love. It's dependence dressed as devotion. And you've lived through enough to know that nothing good ever comes from losing yourself in the name of keeping someone else. And as you continue to evolve, you begin to understand that solitude is not something to escape. It's something to embrace. It's the space where clarity grows. When you're alone, you can hear your own thoughts without the distortion of others' expectations. You can listen to your intuition, that quiet voice that always knew the truth, even when you didn't want to hear it. You learn that solitude doesn't mean isolation. It means alignment. It's where you come back to yourself after being stretched thin by the world. And in that space, you begin to dream again. Not about people, but about possibilities. You start thinking about the life you want to build, the version of yourself you want to become. You rediscover ambition, not the kind that chases approval, but the kind that comes from purpose. You stop asking, who do they want me to be? And start asking, who am I when I'm finally free from pretending? This is the chapter where everything you've learned begins to take shape. You see the lessons not as losses, but as blueprints. Every heartbreak taught you resilience. Every disappointment taught you discernment. Every goodbye taught you self-respect. Nothing was wasted. Even the moments that broke you became the foundation of your strength. And here's the most beautiful part. People start to notice the change in you. They can't quite explain it, but they feel it. The calm in your presence, the steadiness in your energy, the way you no longer chase or cling. You carry yourself differently now, not with arrogance, but with quiet certainty. You've stopped needing to be chosen because you've already chosen yourself. And that kind of energy is magnetic. The irony is, once you stop chasing love, it begins to find you, not in desperate bursts, but in gentle, effortless ways. You attract people who recognize peace because they've found it too. People who see your worth because they've learned to see their own. You stop repeating cycles because you no longer operate from the wounds that once dictated your choices. And you realize that healing was never about going back to who you were before the hurt. It was about becoming someone stronger because of it. It was about creating a life so aligned, so authentic, that you could never lose yourself that way again. So, as you stand in this new chapter, take a moment to look back, not with sadness, but with gratitude. Because everything that fell apart was clearing the path for this. For the peace you now hold, for the clarity you now live with, for the strength you've earned. You survived the storm, and not only that, you learned to dance in the rain. You learned that your worth doesn't waver with someone's inability to see it. You learned that peace is the real prize, not attention. And as you move forward, you carry that truth quietly within you, unshakable, unwavering, and whole. Because this is what healing really looks like. Not perfection, not absence of pain, but the quiet confidence of knowing that whatever comes next, you'll meet it with grace. Because now, finally, you know your value and you'll never hand it over again. There comes a time after the quiet and the stillness when something inside you begins to awaken again. It's not dramatic, not sudden, but steady, like dawn breaking slowly over a long, dark night. You start to feel a pulse of life that had been silent for too long. You begin to sense movement, not the restless kind that once drove you to chase love or approval, but a grounded, deliberate kind. This is the stage where you stop merely existing and begin to live again, not for anyone else, but for yourself. The truth is, healing is never linear. It's not a clean line from pain to peace. It's a spiral. You revisit old emotions, you face echoes of your past, and sometimes you stumble. But each time you do, you rise faster, stronger, and more certain of who you are. Because now, you're not running from your past, you're learning from it. You've turned your wounds into wisdom, your heartbreak into boundaries, and your silence into strength. This stage of growth is powerful because it's no longer about escaping what hurt you. It's about creating something new from it. You begin to take ownership of your story, not as a victim, but as the author. The things that once made you feel small now fuel your determination. The people who doubted you become silent witnesses to your evolution. And for the first time in a long time, you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start saying it happened for me. This shift changes everything. You start to see how every disappointment carved out space for something better. Every rejection redirected you towards something real. Every ending created the beginning you needed. It doesn't mean the pain didn't matter, it means it finally makes sense. Because now, standing here, you see the full picture. With this understanding comes a new level of calm. Not because life suddenly became easier, but because you did. You've learned that peace isn't the absence of chaos. It's the ability to stay grounded in the middle of it. You no longer need constant reassurance. You no longer wait for apologies that may never come. You've reached a point where forgiveness is no longer about them. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of holding on. And as you move through life with this new perspective, your energy changes. People feel it before you even speak. There's something unshakable about a person who knows their worth, a quiet confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. It's in the way you walk, the way you listen, the way you no longer explain yourself to those who don't deserve access to your mind. You begin to understand the difference between solitude and loneliness, between connection and attachment. You no longer chase people just to avoid being alone. Instead, you protect your solitude like something sacred, because it is. It's in solitude that you find clarity, direction, and the kind of peace that can't be disturbed by someone else's chaos. And when new people enter your life, you see them differently. You no longer rush to fill the silence with validation or effort. You let things unfold naturally. You've learned that anything forced will eventually break. Now you're drawn to consistency, to gentleness, to honesty. You don't crave intensity anymore. You crave stability, because you've learned that love isn't supposed to feel like confusion. It's supposed to feel like coming home. This shift is what makes you magnetic, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you found authenticity. People are drawn to those who are at peace with themselves because that kind of peace is rare. It can't be faked. And ironically, when you no longer seek external validation, that's when it starts to appear. But this time, you don't depend on it. It's a reflection, not a requirement. And then something beautiful happens. You begin to create. Your energy, once consumed by overthinking and pain, becomes available again. For art, for goals, for purpose. Your mind opens, your focus sharpens. You start to channel your emotions into growth. This is where your past stops defining you and starts empowering you. Everything you went through becomes material for the person you're becoming. You realize that what you once thought was breaking you was actually shaping your vision, your strength, your sense of self. You understand now that being undervalued didn't make you less worthy. It made you more aware. It taught you the kind of discernment that can't be learned through comfort. It taught you to see beyond words, to read energy, to protect your peace with precision. And as you look back on the person you once were, the one who begged to be seen, who waited for love to validate her existence, you feel compassion, not shame, because she didn't know what you know now. She didn't know that sometimes losing people is the universe's way of saving you. She didn't know that solitude would become her sanctuary. She didn't know that the version of her she was becoming was far stronger than the one she was fighting to keep. And that's the heart of this chapter. Gratitude. Not the superficial kind, but the deep soul-level gratitude that comes from surviving something that once threatened to break you. Gratitude for the lessons, the redirections, the endings that became beginnings. Gratitude for the strength that emerged when everything else fell apart. Because now you see, it was never about being valued by someone else. It was about learning to value yourself so deeply that no one could ever make you forget it again. You've arrived at a place where peace feels like home, where solitude feels like safety, and where self-respect feels like love. This isn't the end of your story, it's the continuation of it. Written with clearer eyes, steadier hands, and a heart that finally beats for itself. You're not chasing anymore, you're building. You're not proving anymore, you're becoming. And that is the quiet revolution of self-worth. There comes a time in your evolution when you no longer feel the need to explain your transformation. The people around you might notice it. The calm in your tone, the way you no longer rush to defend yourself, the way you walk away instead of reacting. But you won't feel the urge to justify it because growth, real growth, doesn't need an audience. It just needs consistency. And that's where you are now, in the quiet, steady part of your healing where peace speaks louder than words ever could. This is the stage where your silence becomes power, not the silence of avoidance, not the silence that hides pain, but the silence that comes from clarity, the kind that says, I know who I am, and I no longer need to convince anyone of it. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop revisiting old conversations in your mind. You realize that people who truly understand you don't need 1,000 explanations, and those who refuse to understand you wouldn't listen even if you gave them one. And so you begin to live differently. You operate from intention, not reaction. Where you once felt the need to prove your worth, now you simply embody it. Where you once overextended yourself for others, now you give with balance and self-respect. And this shift, this quiet change in how you move, begins to transform everything around you. You start to notice that your energy no longer matches the places or people you used to tolerate. It's not that you think you're better, it's that you've outgrown chaos. Gossip no longer excites you, drama no longer interests you, and inconsistency no longer keeps you hooked. You crave depth, honesty, and peace. Things that once felt rare, but now feel like requirements. And when something disrupts that peace, you don't fight it anymore. You step back, observe, and let it go. Because you've learned that not everything deserves a reaction, and not everyone deserves access to you. This stage of your journey is also about alignment. It's about learning to live in harmony with what you say you want. You begin to realize that peace requires discipline. It's not just about removing negative people. It's about removing the habits that keep inviting them in. It's about being honest with yourself when you're tempted to return to what's familiar but unhealthy. Because growth is not just about knowing better, it's about doing better, especially when it's uncomfortable. You start building your life with intention. One boundary, one choice, one day at a time. You wake up and ask yourself not, who do I need to please today? But what do I need to honor today? And slowly, your life begins to take shape in a new way. The same things that once drained you begin to fade, and the things that nurture you start to grow. You become deliberate with your time, with your words, with your energy, and as a result, everything around you starts to elevate. The irony is, when you reach this point, the world begins to mirror back the energy you've created within. New opportunities appear. People who align with your peace begin to show up, and those who can't handle your calm quietly fall away. You realize that you no longer need to chase what's meant for you, because what's meant for you arrives when you're aligned, not when you're desperate. And alignment feels different. It's not excitement mixed with anxiety. It's calm mixed with clarity. It's the gentle knowing that you're exactly where you need to be, even if it doesn't look like where you thought you'd end up. You stop rushing your process because you've learned that everything meaningful takes time. Healing, love, purpose, all of it. You stop measuring your progress by external milestones and start measuring it by inner peace. This stage also reveals something important. How you treat yourself becomes the template for how the world treats you. You've stopped waiting for someone to recognize your value because you finally recognize it yourself. You speak to yourself with respect, you forgive your mistakes without shame, and you celebrate your small victories without needing applause. That shift in self-relationship becomes the foundation for every other connection in your life. You start to see that people who value you don't need convincing. They feel it. They meet your energy with effort, not excuses. They show up without you having to beg for their presence. And for the first time, you stop confusing comfort with love. You stop chasing the familiar, even when it feels safe, because you've realized that safety isn't found in predictability. It's found in authenticity. And there's a subtle beauty in this transformation. You become untouchable in a way that doesn't look like arrogance, but like peace. It's not that things stop affecting you, it's that they no longer define you. Someone's rejection doesn't shake your confidence. Someone's opinion doesn't disturb your peace. And someone's absence doesn't make you question your worth. You've built too much within yourself to ever let the outside world dismantle it again. This stage of your journey isn't loud, but it's powerful. It's the quiet realization that you finally mastered the art of detachment. Not because you don't care, but because you care differently. You care from a place of abundance, not need, from choice, not fear. And that is the highest form of freedom. You start to live life on your own terms, not out of rebellion, but out of self-respect. You're no longer trying to fit into places that don't align with your peace. You're no longer bending your boundaries for temporary acceptance. You're no longer performing for love because you've realized that real love doesn't need performance. It just needs truth. And that's the beauty of arriving here. At this stage of quiet confidence, unshaken peace, and grounded purpose. You've learned that the greatest revenge is not anger, not distance, not even indifference. It's elevation. It's building a life so full, so authentic, that the person you once were wouldn't even recognize the person you've become. Because now, you no longer seek validation. You embody it. You no longer beg for peace. You protect it. And in doing so, you've become everything you once hoped someone else would be for you. Constant, steady, and whole.